Come on.
What do you want?
I'm heading to the Prancing Pony.
Hobbits? More hobbits? What's more out of the Shire by your talk? My business brings you to Bree.
We wish to stay at the inn. Our business is our own.
All right, young sir, I meant no offence. It's my job to ask questions after nightfall. There's talk of strange folk abroad. Can't be too careful.
This is Bree and the Barrow-Downs from Iron Crown Enterprises Ice, made for the MERP, Middle-earth role-playing game, and I paid $6 for this one. Brand new, $6. And a Middle-earth adventure module, complete and ready to run. And we'll give ourselves a little bit of, here's an overview of Bree and Combe, Straddle, and Archet. The thing is, the little clip there from Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings version of Bree makes this place seem much more substantial than it is in canon or in Tolkien's works. It looked like a much more robust community, and there may have been times in its history when it did have that role or that look, but as of Lord of the Rings, it was supposed to be a bit of a quiet crossroads village, more of a village than town, but it is qualifiable on the however you want to make the debate about being a town. The other thing I kind of disapproved of in Tolkien or in Peter Jackson's version is, I think, and this is just a minute little detail, but the fact is that the humans and halflings co-inhabit Bree and Bree land in general in relative numbers of equality. I don't think that it was ever a given census of this amount of human versus this amount of halfling, but if you look in the video, there's very, very few halflings other than the primary characters. I think there's one or two potential ones way in the background, but I think that they could have added a bit more to give it that flavor that Tolkien intended, but that's just my opinion on it. So here is a regional map, Bree and the surrounding. So if you look at this, it gives, to give it a flex, you got the Greenway, or the Great North-South Road, that runs from Fornost for many years, the capital of Arnor, and then Arthedain, and points south, such as Tharbad and Isengard, and then eventually Rohan, Gondor, etc. And the east-west road, also often called the Dwarven Road, because it's never quite implied that the dwarves constructed it, but the road is, or a variant of that road, has been in existence from the earliest of the First Age, even if it was just considered a trek. And it will travel from the far Linden over here in the Blue Mountains to the east, accumulating near Lake Town and Dale, because there's no official road or path to the further east because of the open plain that's there. It's just a given, but it is very significantly potent. So another thing is another piece of a map of the Shire. The Shire was one specific, I always thought it was kind of strange. I thought maybe they were waiting for some reason to do some big elaborate source book on the Shire, and they didn't create one early on. It's just kind of a patchwork, but there's nothing specifically geared towards the Shire, or they could have left it up to the GM and the players to fulfill. If you're going to campaign as halflings, as hobbits, excuse me, perhaps you want to create your version of the Shire or what have you. Bree and the Barrow-Downs, so guidelines for using the player. Of course, the basic conversion charts that are found in pretty much every Iron Crown MERP installment, allowing you to convert to any game system that you're comfortable with or you prefer playing in. Chapter 2, Bree and the Barrow-Downs, an introduction in history. Just, pretty much everybody for those that don't. Breeland is a small settled area in central Eredor. It lies just east of the Turn Girthid, the Barrow-Downs, and the ancient Barrow-Downs. The region has been almost continuously inhabited since the First Age. In Third Age, 1700, Bree is not much different than it would have been at the time of the War of the Ring, some 1300 years later. A prosperous, quiet, but sometimes threatened farming community standing near the intersection of the Great East Road and the Greenway, the two major thoroughfares of the Kingdom of Arnor. Breeland is quite small and contains 4 villages within the boundaries: Bree, western slopes of Bree Hill, etc., etc. Anyway, so there's this little oasis of civilization and calm in a very rugged and wild wilderness area of a once ancient country of Arnor. And I think it's interesting to note that they don't touch on it in depth in anything I've read, but I think it's implied that even at the height of Arnor, Isildur was in command, and was the king and or his seniors, his earliest sons, and then to some extent during Arthedain. I think as Arnor starts to wane and they break into its sister kingdoms, Breeland becomes much more prominent and self-governing. But I think even at the height of Isildur, they've left Breeland more or less to its own devices. It was never suggested that they put a thane or a noble or anybody in charge of it, nor did they promote anybody other than they let the mayor system that they had go. Other than the security, there's references in some source books about when the king of Arthedain insisted that the Breeland Guard become more robust and things like that. Is because they sponsored it, not because they enforced it, a direct decree, at least to my understanding. It's not to say it wasn't that way, but I think Breeland came and Arnor came and went, and Breeland is still there. It's the same reason why it's still there now. It's serves a role, and the people who live there are careful and walk that line, and it's just wealthy enough to be comfortable in a small oasis, as I said, and not too big or powerful to attract much larger problems or more ambitious individuals. So we got the settling and refounding of Breeland. Warfare, strife, and the plague. Breeland in Third Age 17. It says Breeland recovered very well from the plague, partially because it lies in the conjunction of the Greenway and the Great East Road. Town's location brought it commerce and immigrants that needed to recuperate, and though somewhat diminished in size, the area almost as prosperous in the great days of Arnor a few centuries ago. There's a piece there. Travelers, soldiers, merchant, dwarves, and caravans heading in every direction passed through Bree. Villagers regard these strangers with friendly tolerance, ready to lend a helping hand or a friendly chat in the inn. On the whole, the influence of commerce upon the character of the village is diffuse. Bree is prosperous, retains its character as an agricultural community, which is when I said I didn't quite agree with that clip, that downtown Bree clip, just how busy and crowded and people at night, excuse me, especially at night, that just seemed, in bad weather, it just seemed to imply that it was a much more robust, larger community than it's portrayed both in the novels and in the game material. So Breeland proper, men and hobbits of Bree have a close, friendly relationships, often working together on various farm tasks. Commonly they trade off farm chores, men accomplishing a task better suited to manage height for a hobbit farmer and vice versa. Halflings' adept fingers are particularly demand in close quarters where extreme dexterity is desired, so the managed families had even have hobbit-sized chairs in their parlors, their children having their own crafted furniture. Only the smaller farmers reside in the village proper, along with agricultural workers, guardsmen, and various craftsmen. There are no real commercial stores or shops in Bree, since everyone supplies his own needs, and it makes up for the lack at the market held every 2 weeks. The neighboring towns of Staddle, Archet, Combe, and Staddle are also farming communities. They are far smaller than Bree and have no walls. These 3 villages lie along the small roads and crisscross Breeland in a haphazard fashion. Let's talk about the walls of Bree for a second. I don't think I mean, like I said, I believe if we looked at that map, the town, and they're not complete walls. The town walls do not go as far as it's suggested. It does not encircle the entire hill. So there's places here where they could come over the hill or climb the steep hillside and get into town without the wall. But the wall, for the most part, I think in the wall and ditch, because it implies there's a ditch here, though we don't see it in the movie, that was created in past times and then occasionally rebuilt and reinforced, perhaps by Arnor and later Arthedain, to help protect a key location, or Cardolan, and so on and so forth. I don't think Breeland itself supports a very robust defense, because it's just not plied. If things got so bad that they felt that there was no chance of fighting off a foe, they probably packed up and ran for the neighboring woods or downs or hills and hid, came back and picked up the pieces. And so we got the Chatwood, considered part of Breeland, for the most part a quite tame woodland. Talks about Bree's agriculture, the economy of Breeland, politics and power of Breeland, town guard, the moot, the office of mayor. The mayorship is an honorary position. The mayor controls the treasury money, which primarily goes to seeing that the roads of the Breeland are kept in order. Other than that, there really isn't much for the mayor to do besides open the autumn fair and preside at the harvest and spring festivals. To be the mayor of Breeland is a sign of respect and esteem and affection of the men and hobbits of Breeland. The term of office is 3 years. Mayors are elected at the moot. Then the King's Rest, which is later the Prancing Pony, but there's always been a very large inn as a centerpiece of Bree. Considering its role as a crossroads, it makes perfectly good sense. We talking fairs and festivals, the autumn fair, harvest home, mid-year, the Yule fair. And then we have chapter 4, prominent families, personalities of Breeland, various. This is the Heathertoe clan. Said nobody knows when or how or when where or when the family got its name, but they say there's always been a Heathertoe in Breeland. The Heathertoe family is one of the original Dunlanding settlers of Bree. So the Heathertoes are a human clan. Other town folk a note. Goes on for a couple of pages. Notable institutions and their keepers: the Bree School, the miller, the blacksmith, carpenter, tanner, innkeepers of the Prancing Pony, figures of intrigue, bandits, the transients, Gandalf the Grey, Helborn the Ranger, another infrequent visitor. Think of Aragon in an earlier age. Rush the Peddler, Breath the Tinker, or chapter 5, the Barrow-Downs and their haunting. This is the second large section of Breeland. The module is focusing on the Barrow-Downs as they talk about the nature, gives some overview of some different types of barrows, and it notes that humans have been, especially the ancestors of the Numerians, the Dunedain, had been using this region to bury their dead since the First Age. And when the I don't call them the exiles or refugees, when the faithful returned or came back and fled the downfall of Nuremberg, and one of the reasons Isildur and the Uber faithful chose to settle in Arnor, it was because of the Downs. It's a connection that predates Nuremberg itself, and gives, I think, gives Isildur a little bit more heft to his royal claim as the High King of the Numerians that are now in existence. Since Numer's gone, you can't really call them refugees or exiles once they settled the Gondor and Arnor. So explaining the structures of barrows, the whites. So the year following the dreadful plague of 1636-37, evil spirits from Agmar and Radur entered the Barrow-Downs. In this way, the mighty rich king perverted and revigorated the fallen princes of Cardolan, making all evil ghosts of them slaves of his will, etc. And it's more than just the princes of Cardolan being buried here. Barrow layouts, Dane burials, and it goes into detail, possible treasures that you can find. It also tells you what kind of white major or minor. So this one, a major white haunts this tomb. A major white, a lesser white haunts this tomb. So a lot of detail on these things. There's, and it talks about that a little bit in here too. There's a little bit. It's not quite kosher to go tomb raiding, because there are going to still be descendants of the Numerians, among the Rangers, and I'm going to do a separate video on that after I'm done with this. I had some success with the Fall of Arnor, and I want to pursue a little bit more of my opinion and view of what I think of what happened and how things operated and wherefore and what why. So we know that there's reasons why the Numerians, the Arnorians later, and continue to see these places as holy areas, and would try to protect them and defend them, and would probably discourage people from raiding the tombs. And I think that at some point, there's a point after the fall of Arthedain when the Numerians, the Arnorians that were left, probably chose to actively discourage people from going into the Barrow-Downs, and knowing that they couldn't eliminate all the whites, the undead, actually saw them as a form of twisted evil guardians for their ancestry. That's just something to consider. Alright, so Edain barrows on the mounds of the princes, various specific tombs, royal burials of Arnor, fourth son of Isildur, Eldakar's tomb, Arnator's tomb. There's no tomb for Isildur himself or Eladel here, and not sure. I think Isildur, he was lost to the river, and it's mentioned somewhere else, hidden. One of the great eagles had found his body and swept him away, and they buried him under a stone cairn in the mountains. Eladel, I'm not so sure. We know Eladel died in the last alliance fighting Sauron. I just don't know exactly for sure. I think he's buried in Gondor. I think there's some mention in one of the other modules about that, but it's not here. So royal burials at Cardolan. Then we have some suggested adventures: trouble on the homestead, beating on the road, bandits at the autumn fair, adventures on the Barrow-Downs, revenge of Furman, recovery expedition to the Barrow-Downs, adventures in the wild, warriors of Barrow-Dindol. Barrow-Dindol is a tower that was constructed just before Cardolan fell, or before Cardolan fell. And anyway, so here's the other half of that map. In these cases, the maps are part of the book cover, so I never took them out, although I had at various times taken photocopies of them to use in game for game references. Just some good stuff there. Bree and the Barrow-Downs, based on J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth, detailed in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. This is Rick, and this is your seat at the table. And that is Frankie making a racket.